It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, December 27th. I'm politics reporter Dirk Vanderhart, and we're doing something a bit different this holiday week. Earl Blumenauer is one of the longest-serving elected officials in Oregon history, if not the longest. He first won election to the Oregon House of Representatives in his early 20s, and over the course of 5 decades went on to serve on the Multnomah County Commission, Portland City Council, and most famously for nearly 30 years representing Portland in Oregon's 3rd Congressional District. In that time, Blumenauer has stood out for any number of reasons: his bow tie, his enthusiasm for bicycles, and his passion for cannabis legalization, to name a few. But now he's saying goodbye to public office and looking forward to a role helping his hometown find its feet. Blumenauer stopped into OPB on December 13th to chat with me about his career, his take on national politics, and what comes next. Here's that conversation. Congressman Earl Blumenauer, welcome to OPB. Thank you for coming into the studio on this rainy Friday morning.
My pleasure.
So if I'm not mistaken, yesterday was your last day in an active Congress. How many days do you actually have left in office at this point?
20.
5 decades in elected office. I think you say 54. I don't know. I don't know where the exact start date is, but it's above 50 years at this point.
Yeah, it was May 1970 when we had the campaign to lower the voting age. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing it more or less on a full-time basis ever since.
So it's got to be a surreal feeling that you, as we just talked about as you were walking in, flew back from D.C. for the last time as a congressperson, it sounds like. Exciting, sad, mix of the two. How are you feeling?
Oh, it's time. It's delightful. As you know, I made a decision last October that I really didn't think it made sense for me to devote 2 more years of my life to campaign to serve in an increasingly dysfunctional Congress for another 2 years.
Right.
I made the assessment that I could do more as a civilian, and I've been working to wrap it up over those last 14 months. And we've handed off all our major projects to other members of Congress.
Yep.
I'm feeling really good about where we are.
Well, I do want to get into what's next, but first let's just touch a bit on your history. So if people don't know, before Congress, you served first in the state legislature, then you moved to the Multnomah County Commission, then you moved to the Portland City Council for, I think, around a decade. And I think, as I understand your career, it's thought about probably your best known, feel free to take issue with this, in that time for your work on the city council. You helmed the Bureau of Transportation. There was just a number of things that happened. But this was also a time when I think Portland was taking steps, as you know, to becoming a version of the city that would be seen as a model, as visionary, as kind of the place to be in a sort of a modern American city. What did you, or just the policymakers of your generation of the 80s or the 70s, what did you guys get right?
Well, there was a goal here to empower citizens within the framework that we established, and I was in the Oregon legislature when we did Senate Bill 100, worked at the city and a whole host of things. I was responsible for the planning bureau and transportation, as you say, being able to empower citizens in the decision-making process, looking at the big picture, something that I think Portland has done historically, the notion that we can actually plan how we put the pieces together, looking at the long haul, and engaging citizens in that planning process. I think Portland did a superb job of that, making it as a model of a livable community recognized far and wide.
Your political career has very much, at least your congressional career, has very much been wrapped up in bicycles. You're wearing your trademark bicycle pin right now. And I mean, you started the Bicycle Caucus. You're scoffing. Do you think that that's an inaccurate sort of summary?
No, it is something that I worked on and I'm proud of.
Okay.
But the work we did with international water and sanitation, the disaster legalization of cannabis. I'm proud of being an advocate for bike partisanship,
right.
But it was a relatively small part of an overall agenda of which I'm very proud.
And I don't want to minimize any of that. But my question was this. You brought that in. You started the Bike Congressional Caucus. Recently, Rex Burkholder has told a story. Rex Burkholder, one of the co-founders of the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, of wanting a bike lane on Northeast Broadway when he was beginning his efforts, running up against a Bureau of Transportation helmed by Earl Blumenauer and coming up against pushback, which is a surprising thing to hear, just because you are such an advocate for bike lanes and things like that in general. Do you remember this? And was there a switch that flipped at some point? Help me understand it.
The things that Rex was involved with was a very complicated situation. We were trying to keep the trailblazers in the city of Portland. There were efforts to try and move it out to the suburbs. The transportation that we did in the central city was complex and hard.
Okay.
There was an effort here to try and keep all the pieces moving in the right direction. My advocacy for cycling, I think, is pretty well known and very aggressive.
Sure.
Starting from the very beginning.
Okay.
But it wasn't just bicycles at that time. We were dealing with a problem in the central city, trying to keep the trailblazers there, dealing with the stadium, dealing with the redevelopment of the area around the convention center.
Gotcha.
This is a little more complex when you're managing these issues.
Yeah.
And so I like Rex. I respect him. He didn't have a sense of how we were trying to put the pieces together with the business community, with the bureaucracy, and the cross currents that were at work. I think the proof is what I have done over the course of over 50 years. Advocacy, vision, work for cycling here and around the country. I don't apologize to anybody, but this was a small part of a larger pattern.
Certainly was not trying to question your bona fides on that. Just it was an interesting...
But Rex didn't have the responsibility of trying to keep the trailblazers in the city of Portland.
Gotcha.
A very complex set of interactions with the convention center, with the Moda Center, with the transportation in an area that is still deeply challenging.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased we've got $500 million for the Albina Vision Trust to try and unscramble something that has been a problem for as long and I've been in elective office.
You know, livability, I think, has been huge for your career in public service. Feel free to take issue. I don't want to minimize your other stuff, but I was watching an ad from, I think, your first congressional run. You literally ran past the MAX train, I guess, past a curbside recycling. You're literally jogging past these things, but literally running on these issues. I wonder, you know, so to the extent that has been part of your entire 30-year stint in Congress, what do you think has changed from the time you got there to today? Has it gotten easier to push these ideas? Has it suddenly gotten harder as we've sort of shifted post-pandemic? I mean, where do you think these issues stand today?
I think the challenge of making Portland the most livable city in the country remains. We made some amazing progress. Lately, we've had problems, particularly as it relates to the pandemic and the issues of homelessness and problems on our streets.
Yep.
But we still have great bones. You move less than half a mile from the problems downtown, and you are in some of the most livable neighborhoods in America. I think we got that right. We've got some work to do in terms of being able to continue progress. We're still recovering from the pandemic. Remember, the Federal Department of Transportation was telling people not to ride transit because it was dangerous. We've had economic problems. We've got a mindset. But I think basically the principles are the same. And around the country, I've been in over 200 communities where we've worked with issues of streetcar, light rail, land use planning, neighborhood empowerment. It still resonates. People are impressed with what we're doing here, and they want to emulate it.
One thing I've been curious about since this year's election, I've thought about what me and you talked about when you announced you wouldn't run again. And you told me a couple things. You told me first that there had been some political pinnacles that you'd recently helped achieve with the bipartisan infrastructure law, your input in that, with the Inflation Reduction Act, your ability to steer dollars via those things. Another thing you said was that, and I think you mentioned it earlier in our conversation, your issues that you were still working on, you felt like were teed up and ready for someone to pick up the ball and run them across the finish line. We are now looking at an incoming presidential administration that may try to claw back unspent money from those two big spending bills, and a Republican-run Congress where perhaps, and I don't know all the partisan leanings of your issues, but perhaps those things are harder to achieve. So has that picture changed, and how has that picture changed since the election and the results?
We've worked very hard to make sure our livability agenda is not partisan. Whether it's bike partisan, what we've done in terms of water, land use planning, transportation choices, taming traffic. These are all areas that we have achieved on a bipartisan basis. I started this Congress in Houston with a large gathering of people who were there interested in the work we did with the energy provisions. Now, there's loose talk from a somewhat erratic president. He talks, who knows in terms of what it is that he really believes, if he really believes. And he's said all sorts of reckless things. We're going to deport all these agricultural workers, which will shut down the dairy industry in the United States. His campaign rhetoric will hit reality. But the work we've done has all been on a bipartisan basis. In 2017, we had a bigger Republican majority, and Trump and the Republicans wanted to unwind the agreement we reached dealing with wind energy. They were doing that in the reconciliation package. Should have been smooth sailing. And we stopped them. There is bipartisan support for what we did. A number of these projects in transportation and energy are centered in red districts. And as a practical matter, the new regime cannot ignore engineering, the economy, and science. And what we've done relates to all of those. All those were bipartisan achievements. There are a number of things that are in the pipeline. It's part of what I've been working on, is helping people understand how to take advantage of it, getting more things now in the course of 30 days that remain before or 34 days or whatever it is before the new administration takes office. Working with the Department of Transportation, making sure we're obligating as much of this money as possible and get it in the pipeline. But the core of what we've done is not partisan. The core of what we've done has had Republican and Democratic support, and they are what the communities want. So I think there's resilience behind this. The work that speaking of resilience, in terms of what we do dealing with natural disasters. These are things, you can't get insurance in Florida increasingly. So the reality of being able to do this going forward has implications for the business community, for neighborhoods, and for local government. And I think keeping our focus on what we've accomplished and how we've accomplished it means that we'll be able to continue on this agenda. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying they were bipartisan, they made economic sense, the public supported them then and supports it now. It's worth fighting for, and I think the odds are pretty good that we're going to come out of it okay.
Another place where you've had significant influence during your career has been on trade policy through your role in the Ways and Means Committee. And we also have a president coming in who's got some very notable, often talked about trade ideas around tariffs that I think some people in Oregon feel could be pretty destructive to their ability to export and have some real concerns about. How are you looking at the proposals that you've seen? How realistic are they? And just in general, give me your sense of what he's talking about.
Well, the biggest achievement in the prior Congress that Trump attempts to take credit for is the revision for NAFTA Trump did nothing with that. We took a bill that was dead on arrival. We worked with Robert Lighthizer, his trade representative, and fashioned an approach that actually got a majority of Democrats to support and strong Republican support. Having an agenda that is not a series of drive-by tariffs. They're shooting with real bullets. If you're going to upset our largest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, if you want their cooperation on immigration and migrants, for instance, threatening to invade the country is, I would say, gently counterproductive. Early on, they declared working with Canada a national security threat. Really? An ally that worked with us on NATO. We've got this longest border, and they're a national security threat. So a lot of this stuff is just random talk. They have consequences. But we've worked on a series of initiatives in the trade agenda, again, to bring people together rather than divide them. What we've done on forced labor, legislation dealing with illegal logging that's reduced illegal logging 40% in terms of adjustments we made to the Lacey Act. A number of these things that we've been able to accomplish has been done working on a bipartisan basis on things that make sense, rather than drive-by tariffs, extreme rhetoric, and declaring enemies of the people we need to rely on. The challenge of China requires that we work with Japan, we work with the European Union, and our closest, largest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. Ultimately, I think we'll get around to that point. I can't make sense out of campaign charges that Donald Trump has made. They would be disastrous, and it's recognized as such, drive up prices and divide us from some of our closest allies. But he's going to have to work that out. Reality is going to intervene. You know, this notion that somehow he's got two people who are going to help him cut the deficit 40% and leave Social Security and Medicare alone is lunacy. It won't happen. And so at some point, reality intervenes. They backtrack or they just deny they ever said it. That's not my problem anymore. That's why I really welcome stepping out of this environment. I've enjoyed the work. It's important. I want to be dealing with things here that are hyper-local, that we can follow, that we can put points on the board for our community, and deal with what we have to with the federal government.
Well, that is a perfect segue because I do want to talk about what's next. You have accepted a senior fellowship role at Portland State University. If I'm right, this is a second stint at PSU for you, because I think I read in the Oregonian you spent 2 years as an assistant to a past president. Is that right?
7 years.
7 years.
That was my first job out of Lewis and Clark College, was working for two of the presidents at Portland State. I really enjoyed that. I loved the institution. I learned a lot, and came to appreciate the power that Portland State exerted in terms of our community vitality. Portland State is 18% of the downtown area. There are about 20,000 people a week on that campus. And there are some extraordinary programs dealing with urban studies, engineering, behavioral health. These are opportunities for Portland going forward, the world-class performing arts programs. And these are things that are not subject to the vagaries of some of the challenges of development. These are things that people care about, add value, and are already there to build on.
So walk me through what you envision for the new role. What are you being hired to do? What do you see as the thing that Earl Blumenauer is going to bring to PSU in Portland? I don't know. Walk me through what you're going to be doing.
Well, part of what I'm doing is finding out how we can best help that equation. I have some strong feelings. I've had some experience, but when I'm not there for another 20 days. But part of what I want to do is work with the community to see ways that my experience and the Institute for Metropolitan Studies can add value. Historically, there has been a much more vibrant role of Portland State University in the city of Portland. In fact, in the 70s, there was a Ford Foundation grant called Vital Partners and focused on the role that Portland State played with its relationship with the city. I think recently that has not been top of mind. Opportunities that we used to have where it was a pipeline between people who worked in the university and people who would be in local government can be strengthened. Being able to spotlight the role that university programs play in the vitality of the community, whether it's housing or public safety or transportation. I'm eager to find out ways that people think we can add to that. The relationship between Portland State, Portland Community College, and the city of Portland is vital. These are, as I mentioned, a source of family wage jobs that strengthen economic opportunities, anchor families and businesses in the city. I think we can do a much better job of promoting those relationships.
You have been, I think, strikingly candid about your concerns about where the city of Portland is at. When you announced you were running for re-election in 2022, you said in that announcement, Portland is broken. You described the situation in the city to Politico as some pieces of downtown look like bombed out Dresden in World War II. Very strong sentiments. So I want to ask the second part of a question that I asked you earlier, which is, what are city and county leaders today not getting right?
Well, let me just say in the 2 years that have passed, I think there's been remarkable progress. The governor has been an amazing partner. There's no political benefit being mayor of Portland.
True.
Tina Kotek has made a significant investment in strengthening that partnership. The downtown task force, a number of people participated in it. I think there's been a reset in county government. There's greater cooperation, I think, between the city and the county than there was 3 years ago. And the most recent election process gives me more optimism. I wasn't certain how the new charter was going to work out, and it could have gone sideways with ranked choice voting and competing for attention. It could have spotlighted people who were being negative. That didn't happen. In the main, it was a constructive set of conversations. I was pleasantly surprised, and we've got a new council that I think is starting with a clean slate. The administrative structure that is being put in place, and it looks like Michael Jordan may stay for another year or two, and we've had some people empowered as administrators in ways that are more consolidated and focused than we've seen in the past. These are delightful developments. And over the last 2.5, 3 years, I think the pieces come together. I think there's a different attitude with the public, and I think there's a different attitude in terms of what we're doing in local government.
One of the ways I look at your congressional career, and feel free to take issue with this, is working to export the values of Portland to the wider world nationally, certainly with things like light rail and the transportation stuff we've talked about, the livability. Probably not an all-encompassing view, but a way that I look at it. And I wonder, you are coming back from 30 years in Congress to be in Portland full-time, thinking about its issues full-time. Are there things you would import from your time in D.C. to the city, the things that Portland needs to be really looking at, that lessons you've taken from elsewhere?
I think the formula remains the same, being able to work on a collaborative basis, looking at the big picture and the long haul, and being able to mobilize resources where you find them, whether it's private sector, programs that we've helped create at the federal level and fund. It requires a comprehensive approach. That is an approach I took to Congress. It's one that I'm proud of. It has borne fruit, and I think we are teed up. Portland has more opportunities now than any time I can think of, whether you're talking about the opportunities at OMSI, the most transit-dense area of the region, the extension of streetcar from Johns Landing to Montgomery Park, Lloyd Center, the work downtown, some of the revitalization that we're seeing in various neighborhoods, Albina Vision Trust with $500 million that's available to unlock a problem that we've had since it was created. These are things that are not specific to Portland, but the approach in terms of big picture, collaboration, being able to strengthen the fundamentals of transportation and land use. I think they continue. I think the principles are solid today as they were 10 or 15 years ago. I think part of what we need to do is make sure that we are executing. We need to put points on the board. Let people see the consequences of these opportunities and take advantage of them.
My initial idea for our discussion, as you know, was that you and I would bike around the city. We weren't able to do this because it's very cold and very wet outside today, and I frankly am happy to be indoors. But my idea was we would visit a number of...
That concept had, with public broadcasting, had a fraught history, because I almost killed Ari Shapiro with an interview on a bike in Washington, D.C. I took him the wrong way down a one-way street. So I had some apprehension about that.
Well, my idea was to visit places of significance either to you or the moment the city is in, and we would talk about that, and we're not able to do that. But where would you have wanted to go?
It's, what's your favorite Portland restaurant?
Mm-hmm.
Who's your favorite child? I am really encouraged with the elements that we've been able to put together. I mentioned OMSI with a new vision that's taking place there. What we're seeing in terms of bike and pedestrian opportunities. I suppose I should mention the Blumenauer Bridge.
Yep.
Pretty powerful symbolically, but these are elements that are part of a larger picture. Work we're doing, something I'm extraordinarily proud of, is the work on 82nd Avenue. These are, I call them orphan highways. The federal government now calls them legacy highways. We've been able to develop 27 revenue streams to help people take these tired state highways that are dangerous and unsafe and are an impediment to economic development and be able to invest in them. 82nd Avenue, we're putting millions into that. There's more along the way. These are opportunities that I find exciting, and I hope that we can get people to focus on what they are. They're simple. It's not complex, but they have defied being able to make a difference up till now. But I think we've set the stage with federal and local funding and changing policies and the mindset that people have, that we don't have to accept streets that are unsafe, the impediment to development, that have outlived their usefulness. We can do better.
There was a part of me that hoped you would walk in this morning with a fruitcake. Sadly, there was no fruitcake. Are your fruitcake days behind you? What's the status of your very well-known yearly fruitcake baking?
Well, it's been a pretty intense period trying to wrap up 54 years, 28 years in Congress, close down and move on, and to make sure that all my projects are handed off to people. There was no opportunity to this point to take the time to bake fruitcake. But I've got 20 days. I'm not going to be in Washington, D.C. I'm hopeful that there may be one or two fruitcakes in my future, not the industrial scale of production that I've done in the past with over 300 fruitcakes. But I think there may be one or two that are there, given the fact that I will be here, not on a plane 14 hours a week, and set free.
Earl Blumenauer, thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much for your decades of public service.
Thank you.
That was Oregon Congressman Earl Blumenauer. This week's episode was produced by Andrew Theen, and our audio engineer is Stephen Cray. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. You can also reach out to us via a brand new email address, opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. We ask each other questions all the time on the podcast, but now we want to hear from listeners. What burning political questions do you have for 2025? Hit us up. Once again, that's opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.